Russia has been in what it seems an eternal war with Ukraine, with devastating consequences for both parties. Today, we are taking a glance into the current situation of Russia by analyzing the country from various perspectives, including a geopolitical, economic, and social analysis, and finish with a brief conclusion on the topic. To truly understand Russia, we must dive into its foundational myths and historical narrative. The story of Moscow is key to this understanding. In the early days, the Eastern Slavs were without governance, vulnerable to Viking kings who wanted to establish slave states. However, the emergence of Kievan Rus marked a turning point. This federation, blending Viking rulers with Greek influences, resulted in economic prosperity and established critical trade hubs in cities like Novgorod and Kiev. Yet, prosperity is often fleeting. The Mongol conquest shattered Kievan Rus, leading to centuries of foreign domination. Amid this chaos, a new center of power emerged: Moscow. Initially overshadowed by Novgorod and Kiev, Moscow's rise was fueled by geography. Situated in the heart of Russian plains, it offered strategic advantages that the Mongols wanted to control. From these ashes, Muscovite Russia arose, driven by the desire for defensive borders. Conquest became integral to its identity, as Moscow expanded its territories, incorporating the Poly-Lithuanian Commonwealth, Mongolic lands, and even reclaiming Kiev. Russia's vastness shaped its military doctrine. Historically, great conquerors failed here. The Ottomans, French, British, and Nazis all faced defeat on Russian lands. The resilience of this empire is legendary. Even often in the brink of collapse, it never fully succumbs. After we have introduced to you a little bit of Russian history, we will continue with the geopolitical aspect. Prosperity has never formed part of Russia. Her lands are synonyms of wastelands. Siberia, with its sub-zero winter snows, combined with humidity at summer from melting snow, and south of Russia, are full of dry lands where only the fittest survives. The Russian lands have the potential of holding massive population growth, but constant wars made sure that these lands were always devastated. Without this destruction, and considering the vast resources hidden through Russia, everyone says that it's inevitable that Russia becomes a world empire. There are never absolute concepts in politics, geography, and history that can explain how we got here, but culture shapes the present and perspective of people. Russia has been enemies with everyone around herself, and even with itself. No one is willing to trust her, but she has not proven trustworthy either. Even in times of the Soviet Empire, she kept her conquest in the East in line with war and secret police. In times where the United States focused in integrating the economies of the West within her own, it was inevitable that she was never going to overtake America. She didn't even manage to maintain her bloc fully together, as seen with the Sino Soviet split and Yugoslavia joining the Third World. Russia feels like she deserves to rule the world. But ruling by the stick makes you enemy of everyone. When the Soviet Union was dissolved, not even Kiev wanted to be part of Moscow's empire. Russia lost so much in the 1990s that the truth became unacceptable, and fascism took over. Now she tries to use violence that destroyed her in the past to assert herself. These geopolitical realities have significantly shaped how Russia forms alliances abroad, particularly with key partners like China, who has played a vital role by providing cheap microelectronic inputs that Russian governments must smuggle to produce its military equipment. Other Russian partners include Asia, Africa, the Middle East, and South America. All these countries have in part alleviated the isolation imposed by the West. Just like Russia, Iran and North Korea suffer from similar international sanctions geared towards their nuclear weapons, reasons why they showed support towards Russia to both collaborate and mitigate the sanctions' effects, creating a dynamic in which now there is the Western allies and the anti-Western group. Countries like USA, Japan, Australia, and other 30 allies have shown solidarity towards Ukraine by implementing different economic sanctions targeting Russia. Sanctions such as the incapability to access financial sectors and international capital, as well as other sanctions implemented by USA, like the incapability to access Western technological inputs. Russia is now in a place that it must cope with an array of sanctions, such as energy sanctions, including an oil price cap, sanctions against banks, companies, and elites that impede them access to international military technology. As the world stands divided between the democratic West and the authoritarian regimes, this geopolitical landscape not only shapes international relations but also profoundly impacts the economic realities within Russia. Despite being in the middle of a war, Russia's economy has shown an upward trend over the last decade. This means that even though much of the world is focused on the conflict, Russia has managed to grow its production. But it's important to remember that this doesn't mean people are necessarily better off, as the war is displacing people and restricting economic freedom, which gives us a mixed picture. In one hand, the economy is growing, and in the other, people have minimal opportunities. Even if it looks that production is growing, it seems that it has been at the cost of rising inflation. Inflation in Russia has been on a roller coaster, especially since the war began. The Consumer Price Index, CPI, which tracks how much everyday goods cost, has bounced between 3 and 6% over the past 4 years. This isn't surprising for an economy under sanctions and in conflict. Now, regarding unemployment rate, on paper, Russia's unemployment rate hit all-time lows, reaching 3% in 2023. But before we celebrate, there's a catch. Many of these jobs are in the military, as wartime mobilization is masking the real employment picture. We have then that the war is artificially lowering unemployment rate because people are being absorbed into the military machine and not the regular economy. Now, if we shift our focus into the financial markets, we have that real interest rates, which are the true cost of borrowing when we take inflation into account, bottomed during 2021 and 2022, which helped borrowers gain from inflation. However, the Russian government, in order to fight the current rising inflation, has risen interest rates to 4.25%. This move is aimed at curbing inflation, but it's a double edged sword. Higher rates will likely choke off long term investment, and with foreign investors fleeing out of the country, this creates bad long term prospects for the Russian financial future. Now, looking at investment, here's where things get interesting. Domestic investment in physical assets is holding up, but foreign investment has plummeted into negative territory. This divergence is largely because of the war. While Russian companies try to shore up domestic production, foreign investors have lost trust, pulling out capital and leaving the country isolated. All this could have long term consequences for the Russia's growth potential. In concluding our analysis, we will take a look into the societal aspects of Russia. Russia has long struggled with population growth, and the war has only worsened this problem. Since 2019, we have seen a spike in immigration as people flee out of the country, not just for better opportunities, but for safety. The war has only increased the government's control on society, restricting freedoms and making it harder for people to access independent information, which in turn drives more people to leave. This internal unrest and population decline have significant implications for Russia's military strategy and expenditures. Military spending has skyrocketed, especially since the annexation of Crimea in 2014. The rapid build-up should have been a warning sign of Russia's larger military ambitions. The war effort has been largely funded by oil and gas revenues, but also by the expropriation of assets from departing Western companies. This reliance on volatile revenue streams raises the risk that the country might struggle to finance the war in the long term if global demand for its resources declines. As the Russian government has been directing its resources towards the war, it has simultaneously been turning a blind eye to the freedom and civil liberties of its people. Over the last 20 years, Russia's rank in terms of freedom and accountability has been on a steady decline. Under President Putin, basic human rights, such as freedom of expression and the ability to participate in government, have been systematically being erased. The war has only amplified this trend, as government prioritizes control of its citizens to maintain its grip on power. This growing focus on control is further reflected in Russian budget allocations, where military spending vastly outweighs essential services like education. Russia's government is pouring a staggering 38% of its budget into the military, compared to only 5% to education. This focus on military spending while neglecting essential services shows the government's single minded focus on winning the war, even if it comes at the expense of the well being of its population. Future budgets are likely to continue prioritizing national security, further straining countries' resources and potentially deepening social discontent. So after all this analysis, what do we get from Russia? We have that Russian government is trying to paint a picture of stability amid chaos. But when we dig deeper into the data, it's clear that the war is creating turmoil not just on Ukraine, but on Russia itself. Economic growth might look strong on paper, but it's driven by military spending and masked by inflated statistics. Inflation and interest rates are squeezing everyday Russians, while foreign investors have lost faith, pulling out capital and isolating the country. At the same time, civil liberties are shrinking, and the country is pouring nearly 40% of its budget into a war machine, leaving essential services like education and healthcare underfunded. This isn't just about the military strategy, it's a reminder that when a government prioritizes war over its people, the long term cost can be devastating. The world is at a tipping point where democracy, freedom, and human rights are under threat, not just in Russia, but globally. We need to remember what's at risk here. This conflict is about more than borders or geopolitics. It's about the future of how nations govern, how they treat their citizens, and what kind of world we want to live in. The end of this war will be a defining moment, and it's crucial that we don't let the politics of conquest and control overshadow the pursuit of peace and freedom. We must remember you can't build a future with tanks and guns alone. You need people, you need purpose. As Fyodor Dostoevsky stated, the mystery of human existence lies not in just staying alive, but in finding something to live for. This was economics. I hope you enjoyed the video. Don't forget to leave a like and comment for more content like this.